On the broadcast tonight, one of Korea's two biggest holidays, the Lunar New Year, kicks off tomorrow, with some 18 million cars expected to hit the nation's expressways during this holiday season. The Korean won rallies the most in 4 months after reports showed Asia's fourth largest economy posted a record current account surplus in the whole of 2013. And the inter-Korean hotline closes for the day with North Korea staying mum on the South's proposal for a reunion of families separated since the Korean War to take place in mid-February. Early edition begins now. It is 4 a.m. in Washington, 5 p.m. in Hong Kong, and 6 on a Wednesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us on this Lunar New Year Eve.
Now, many Koreans have already started making their ways back to their hometowns for the Lunar New Year holiday. Passengers are already beginning to crowd train stations and bus terminals one day before the 4-day holiday weekend begins. Transportation officials expect over 27 million people to travel around the country this Lunar New Year.
Traffic on major highways has already begun to back up at this hour. The congestion is expected to reach its peak tomorrow, when more than 40% of total holiday travelers will depart for their destinations. While most Koreans will stay in the country for the holiday weekend, about 270,000 people are expected to travel to destinations overseas.
Now, while millions of Koreans, like we just said, will be hitting the roads and riding the railways this Lunar New Year holiday to visit family members, a few 100,000 will be taking to the skies.
But this year's holiday being 4 days long, a growing number of people are taking the opportunity to go overseas for a little R&R. Our Connie Lee reports.
The long holiday is nearly here in Korea. And while most are staying close to their homes and in the country, there are some that are taking advantage of the days off on Thursday and Friday to make a trip abroad.
Korean companies are giving out an average of 4.1 days of vacation for this Lunar New Year, slightly more than last year's 3.5 days.
According to 7 of the top travel agencies in Korea, about 40,000 people will be making a trek across the seas for this Lunar New Year holiday. So where are they going? Well, Hong Kong appears to be the top destination.
Last year, the Philippines and Thailand were the hottest destinations during the Lunar New Year. But this year, those places aren't even in the top 5. This holiday, many families booked tickets to Hong Kong for the winter festivities and for the shopping.
Officials say Koreans are shying away from the Philippines because the country is recovering from last year's typhoon, and Thailand because of the ongoing political protests there. So travelers chose destinations a little closer to home this time, with the second and third popular places being Japan and Taiwan.
We're also seeing the trend of more people traveling on their own instead of going with tour packages. This comes from the influence of popular reality TV shows where celebrities find their ways around foreign countries.
TV programs like Grandpas Over Flowers and Sisters Over Flowers, which chronicle the journeys of actors and actresses in different countries, have become so popular, in fact, that some Koreans are opting to visit the very same places. For the next long holiday coming up in the month of May, officials say Korean travelers are eyeing countries like Turkey and Croatia, with plane tickets already being fully booked for then. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
But it's not all good news this holiday season. The bird flu outbreak gripping this country is showing no sign of letting up. The nation is on high alert, especially as a Lunar New Year holiday, which will see millions on the march to their hometowns begins tomorrow.
Authorities say efforts to contain the spread over the next few days in particular will be vital. Our Hwan So-ha reports.
The battle against bird flu will continue over the Lunar New Year holiday, with disease prevention authorities tightening measures to prevent the virus spreading any further. Government employees, local self-governing bodies, the military and police will be on 24-hour standby over the 4-day holiday. Concerns are rising that with an estimated 30 million people on the move over the holiday period, the flu could spread to even more regions. The government has therefore ordered the installation of sterilization facilities and interchanges on highways across the nation. The public is also being asked to refrain from visiting poultry farms and migratory bird habitats and to take extra care not to step on animal droppings. The Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs said the virus can be contained if everyone pulls together.
I ask for your active cooperation in preventive measures during trips to your hometowns this Lunar New Year holiday, even if it's inconvenient.
The minister also said stock breeding farms should sterilize their facilities and surrounding areas every day and immediately report any suspected bird flu outbreaks to the Agriculture Ministry. There are now fears the virus has even spread to the southeastern part of the nation in Gyeongsang-Namdo province. The Agriculture Ministry said on Wednesday that a suspected case at a chicken farm in the city of Miryang was reported Tuesday night. Officials say around 70 chickens were found dead at the farm. New suspected cases also popped up in several farms in west of the country, and the virus was confirmed in Korea's central Chungcheongbuk-do province and another further south in Chungcheong-Namdo province on Tuesday. Meanwhile, farms that have been devastated by the mass culling of their ducks and chickens will receive government compensation before the end of the week. Hwan So-ha, Arirang News.
And it is the Lunar New Year holiday, and there are those who will be disappointed. It's been 2 days since South Korea made its proposal to hold reunions next month for families separated since the Korean War, but Seoul is still awaiting a direct answer from North Korea. The Inter-Korean hotline has been closed for the day, and South Korea's Unification Ministry says there are no plans to open the hotline during the Lunar New Year holiday. The ministry sent a message to the North this morning urging it to reply as soon as possible if it is sincere about resuming the reunions. Now on Monday, Seoul offered to reopen the long-suspended event from February 17th to the 22nd and to hold working-level talks on Wednesday, that is today, to go over the details. Meanwhile, following his visit to Beijing, a U.S. Special Representative for North Korea policy, Glenn Davies, arrived in Seoul and held talks with his South Korean counterpart, Cho Tae-yong, this Wednesday. The two agreed that there will be no denuclearization talks with Pyongyang until the reclusive regime demonstrates sincerity through action. Arirang News' Oh Jin-ju has the details.
Will the long-stalled six-party denuclearization talks resume anytime soon? Glenn Davies, the U.S. envoy on North Korea, says not unless the North changes its attitude and policy direction.
They know what it is they agreed to do back in September of 2005. They know what the United Nations Security Council has decided about their nuclear and missile activities. And so that's what we're looking for, is change to come from North Korea.
In the 2005 agreement reached during the fourth round of the six-party talks, North Korea promised to scrap its nuclear program in return for energy and other aid. South Korea's chief nuclear negotiator Cho Tae-yong stressed on Wednesday that the two countries will continue to work towards putting the six-party dialogue on solid ground so that the talks can produce a fundamental solution to the North Korean nuclear issue.
One is that we'll have to make sure that North Korean leadership will change its strategic calculations and finds that possessing nuclear weapons is not actually in his strategic interests.
On North Korea's recent demand to call off joint military drills between Seoul and Washington, Cho and Davies made it clear they will go on no matter what.
There's a reason why for the last 3 generations, 60 years, there has been, in general, peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, and that is because of the strength and solidarity of our two nations. And on the military side, that relates directly to our ability to be able to respond to any contingencies.
Cho, in a separate meeting with reporters, also emphasized the importance of Beijing's role in persuading the North to give up its nuclear program and vowed to closely cooperate with the U.S. and China to get the six-party talks back on track. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
In a show of solidarity against Tokyo for its ongoing denials of wartime atrocities, Korea's top diplomat met with victims of Japan's sexual slavery on Wednesday. He vowed to do any and all he can to get them a much-deserved apology from Tokyo. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se on Wednesday paid a surprise visit to the House of Sharing, home to a handful of victims of the Japanese military's sexual slavery. Meeting with 6 so-called comfort women, Yoon promised that the Korean government would do all it can to help heal their wounds.
Japanese political leaders have recently said and done things to cause you even greater pain. The Korean government will put our utmost efforts to recover your honor.
The most elderly victims, who have been fighting all their lives for an official apology from the Japanese government, appealed for the minister's help in getting them much-deserved compensation.
I want to receive an apology from Japan before I die, but I think we'll die before that day comes. Please help us recover our honor.
An estimated 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were used as sex slaves by the Japanese army in the early 20th century, and many are still waiting for an apology from Tokyo. Yoon's visit comes amid worsening relations between Seoul and Tokyo, which hit its peak late last year with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's controversial visit to the Yasukuni Shrine, which honors a handful of Class A war criminals. As the first Korean foreign minister to visit the House of Sharing, Minister Yoon said that his visit was meant to show the Korean government's strong determination to protest against Japan's ongoing denial of its historical wrongdoings. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by 2 points. Well, it definitely looks like the Korean economy is gaining momentum, with the nation's current account surplus reaching a record $70 billion last year. Industrial output also expanded at its fastest pace in more than 4 years last month. Still, the finance minister cautioned against having an overabundance of optimism. Arirang's Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Despite concerns about emerging markets and the possible fallout from the U.S. Federal Reserve's expected decision on another cut in its stimulus, the fundamentals of the Korean economy appear strong enough to weather the impact. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday that the nation's current account surplus posted a record $70.7 billion last year. That is up nearly 50% from the previous record of $48 billion reached in 2012. The central bank attributed the record surplus to strong exports coupled with stable global commodities prices that kept import prices under control. Exports, which account for half of the nation's economy, rose 2.1% to reach nearly $560 billion, while imports dropped 0.8% to $515 billion. For December only, Korea posted a surplus for the 23rd straight month, with the amount standing at nearly $6.5 billion. Korea's industrial output, which includes production in the mining, manufacturing, gas, and electricity industries, also grew 3.4% last month, the fastest pace in more than 4 years. while Korea's Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok said that market instability in emerging economies would have a limited impact on the Korean economy. He cautioned against having either too much optimism or groundless anxiety. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Political gridlock kept U.S. President Barack Obama from checking off items on his agenda in 2013, but the president says things will be different this year. In his annual State of the Union address on Tuesday evening in Washington, Obama said he would bypass Congress when and where he could in 2014 to instigate change. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
U.S. President Barack Obama says 2014 will be a year of action, and he's prepared to use his executive power and act without Congress to get things done. In his State of the Union address Tuesday, President Obama focused on issues related to the economy, namely income inequality and job creation. To support the country's lower and middle classes, the president says he will work toward raising the minimum wage for future federal workers by 39% to $10.10 an hour, up from the current $7.25. Obama said higher wages would increase productivity and stabilize the workforce.
But what I offer tonight is a set of concrete, practical proposals to speed up growth, strengthen the middle class, and build new ladders of opportunity into the middle class. Some require congressional action, and I am eager to work with all of you. But America does not stand still, and neither will I.
The minimum wage has remained unchanged for 7 years, and according to a fact sheet released by the White House, that means a family of 4 relying entirely on earnings of a full-time minimum wage worker would raise their children in poverty. But President Obama's critics say a wage increase would mean higher costs for businesses and eventually lead to job cuts. The U.S. president also addressed issues related to immigration reform and climate change. He said the U.S. needs to become more energy independent by doing things such as alternating oil imports with cleaner natural gas. On the diplomatic front, he mentioned the pullout of U.S. troops from Afghanistan and the Iranian nuclear issue, but not North Korea. Obama's speech comes ahead of congressional midterm elections this November and at a time when the polls suggest growing disapproval with how he's handled the economy. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, the Park Geun-hye administration came into office with the national goal of putting a spotlight on cultural enrichment, and now we're seeing that materialized one step at a time. We can now enjoy cultural activities at least once a month for next to nothing, or in some cases completely free of charge. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won reports.
Every last Wednesday of the month is now a day of culture, as designated by the Korean government. On this day, people can get free or discounted admissions to concerts and events at public and private cultural institutions, including national theaters, museums, and galleries. On the first Culture Day, some 800 institutions offered discounts or free admissions to arts and culture events. The idea of designating a monthly Culture Day was first proposed by the Presidential Committee on Cultural Enrichment last October.
Although life can be tough, we hope that at least once a month, people can escape from their daily routines and enjoy cultural activities, nurturing their inner lives and enhancing their quality of life.
Culture Minister Yoo Jin-young says the designation could make culture more accessible to a wider range of people.
Koreans have up to this point led lives focused on work. The designation of Culture Day was made to send a message that now is the time to change our perceptions and lead a new life centering on family and leisure, which are also important values.
From discounted tickets at movie theater chains to free admission to royal palaces, there is a variety of benefits offered on this day. To find out more, you can visit culture.go.kr. The government says more cultural institutions will be joining the initiative to expand the variety of free and discounted events for future Culture Days every last Wednesday of the month. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, 1 year ago tomorrow, Koreans cheered as the nation's very first space rocket blasted into space and successfully placed its science satellite into orbit. It was a day when the nation's space dream finally came true after a number of failed attempts.
Right. So what has changed in the past year, and how has the historic event impacted Korea's space aeronautical industry? For that and more, we have our Song Ji-sun live in the studio. She recently made a visit to the Naro Space Center a year after the launch.
Good evening, Ji-sun.
Good evening, guys.
So you were at the Space Center last year, a couple of times in fact, leading up to the final successful launch of the Naro space rocket, and then went back very recently. So time flies, doesn't it?
Exactly. A year has passed since Naro space rocket was successfully launched, and now Naro Space Center is moving forward for its next new project. In fact, the next project, called Korea Space Vehicle Number 2, already kicked off 4 years ago, even when Naro was being reassembled for its third attempt. Now let's go back to Naro Space Center for its changes.
It took a dozen years and 3 attempts for Korea to join the Space Club by sending a homegrown rocket into space. While the first stage of the Naro rocket was built by Russian engineers, its follow-up, the Korea Space Launch Vehicle Number 2, aims to develop a full 3-stage rocket on Korean soil from testing to launch. These are the key test facilities essential to building rocket engines, scheduled to be completed in April, ahead of a first test run in May.
Anything can happen if the test fails. So the emitter looks over to the sea, and the concrete safety wall is a meter thick to absorb the impact.
A total of 7 new buildings will be lined up here at Naro Space Center, and a brand new, larger launch pad will also be constructed next to the current launcher to test launch 1 completed rocket in 2017.
We're also preparing a separate test facility that simulates the environment in space for the second and third stages that will begin after leaving Earth.
Naro's science satellite was only 100 kilograms, but the KSLV-2 will carry a practical low-orbit satellite 15 times heavier at 1.5 tons. 4 75-ton engines will be needed to send the 3-stage rocket into space, 4 times the size needed for the Naro. If successful in placing its satellite into orbit in 2020, the KSLV-2 will also be used to send a moon orbiter in the same year. Some may wonder if the fast-forwarded timeline is feasible, but the chief says it is, especially as Korea's space agency may now have a new partner other than Russia in moon exploration.
And in terms of the Lunar Explorer, we have stronger international cooperation. NASA has offered to collaborate in moon exploration, as they will be involved in it at the same time we aim to send a lunar lander.
The chief of Korea's Aerospace Research Institute stresses that the keyword now in the space industry is profitability.
We need to attract industry companies to participate in space development in a way that they can create revenue through it. That is why the space paradigm is important to suggest a guideline for the industry. We now have a concrete roadmap, not a vague dream.
Now, Ji-sun, looking forward, how can Korea make profit through this space development project?
That's what the president of Korea's Aerospace Research Institute stressed, to make profit from companies as well. Now, Korea is not just aiming to launch rockets, it is using it to launch satellites of other countries, and also Korea aims to export those satellites. The goal is to share our knowledges to countries that have not acquired the relevant development and technologies. And of course, it's not just for the large companies. For example, Korean Air was selected to assemble the Naro rocket back at the Korea Space Launch Vehicle Number 1. But this time, the agency signed a deal with a mid-sized company that specializes in the industry.
So, Ji-sun, how far ahead does the planning go? What's after the lunar exploration?
Well, to start off, actually the deadlines have been fast-forwarded, especially after President Park Geun-hye inaugurated last year. She named space as a new growth engine, and she also fast-forwarded timelines. For example, the lunar exploration has been fast-forwarded 2 years to 2020. And following that, we're going to Mars. That will be happening in 2030 exactly. And after that, we're going to be developing more rockets with more engines. As you can see in the graph, we're looking at 9 engines, and that will be clustered in 27. And those bigger rockets can transport more complex objects into space. And eventually, Korea is hoping to build a space complex in the air as well.
All right, well, Chisun, we will keep our eyes focused on the stars and see what the mysterious universe has in store for us in the years to come.
Thank you.
Time now to get a check on the weather conditions, and for that, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, tomorrow is the first day of the Lunar New Year holiday here in Korea, so many have already begun their journey back home. So how is the weather looking like for them?
Good evening, Kan-young and Daniel. Well, clouds have begun to move in throughout the country, and those in Jeollanam-do province and Jeju will be the first to see showers later tonight.
And rain in most parts of the nation tomorrow as well, right?
That's right, Daniel. Nationwide sprinkles are forecast from tomorrow morning through the afternoon, so those of you heading home or planning trips should keep in mind that the rain may exacerbate traffic on the roads. Tomorrow, sprinkles will begin in the central regions and gradually spread throughout the country. Total precipitation will only be about 5 millimeters, so it won't be much. Other than that, keep in mind that another round of showers are on its way over the weekend. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at 3 degrees with a high of 7. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan hit 10 and 14 degrees respectively. Moving on to other regions, Jeju and Dokdo peak in the low teens, while Mount Kumgang makes it to 2 degrees. Happy Lunar New Year to you all, and hope you have a wonderful holiday.
Well, thank you for that, Bo-kyung. And that's all from us for this hour. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Moon Kwan-young. Thank you as always for being here with us. Have a wonderful Lunar New Year holidays and enjoy the holidays with your family and friends. And I will see you back here on Monday. Good night.